Late on the evening of January 2nd, senior officials in the United States government gathered for what they understood would be a decisive moment. Inside the White House Situation Room, the President, the Secretary of Defense, senior military commanders and intelligence officials reviewed the final intelligence briefing. The focus was narrow and specific. According to multiple intelligence sources, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro was staying overnight at a secured compound in Caracas. To understand why Donald Trump wanted Nicolás Maduro captured, it helps to look at how Trump viewed Venezuela long before the operation took place. From early in his presidency, Trump treated the Maduro government not as a normal political adversary, but as a criminal organization. US law enforcement agencies had accused senior Venezuelan officials of being involved in large-scale drug trafficking networks that moved cocaine through the Caribbean and into the United States. These accusations were formalized in US court indictments, not just diplomatic statements. Maduro himself was named in US criminal cases. Trump repeatedly emphasized this point, arguing that Maduro was not a legitimate head of state, but a fugitive accused of serious crimes. This distinction mattered. In Trump's view, Maduro did not deserve the protections normally given to foreign leaders. Another major issue was oil and economic control. Venezuela holds some of the world's largest oil reserves, but under Maduro, production collapsed due to mismanagement, corruption, and sanctions. Trump believed that Maduro and his inner circle were using what remained of the oil sector to stay in power and bypass international pressure. Removing Maduro, in Trump's view, was a way to break that control and force a political reset. There was also a strategic dimension. Venezuela had developed close relationships with US rivals, including Russia, China, and Iran. To Trump, this was not just a regional issue, it was a challenge to US influence close to home. Acting against Maduro was meant to send a broader message that such alliances would have consequences. Trump was openly frustrated with years of sanctions and diplomatic efforts that failed to remove Maduro. He saw gradual pressure as ineffective. His leadership style favored decisive action over prolonged negotiation. Domestic politics played a role as well. Trump consistently portrayed himself as a law and order president willing to act where others hesitated. Capturing a foreign leader accused of drug trafficking fit that image and appealed to supporters who viewed Maduro as responsible for regional instability and mass migration. Importantly, Trump did not frame the capture of Maduro as a traditional act of war. He viewed it more like a high-level law enforcement action, similar to past US operations against terrorist leaders or international criminals. From this perspective, sovereignty concerns were secondary to criminal accountability. By late 2025, Trump believed the situation would not change on its own. Maduro had survived protests, sanctions, and isolation. Waiting longer, in Trump's view, only strengthened the status quo. The decision to capture Maduro reflected Trump's broader worldview, identify the central figure behind a problem, and remove them directly. The operation was not designed to occupy Venezuela or fight a long war. It was focused on one objective: removing the individual Trump saw as the main obstacle. Gathering intelligence started in August of 2025. This involved the CIA, Human Intelligence, and ISR Intelligence. Although it is unconfirmed, it's highly likely the CIA had a mole within Maduro's inner circle. This was mostly used to gather information about Maduro's usual routines, eating habits, and people he usually would talk to. The ISR intelligence was carried out by RQ Sentinel stealth drones. These drones have high capabilities, including live video surveillance infrared and night vision camera and radar for tracking movement. It can intercept signals from distance and listen in on frequencies. Over 6 months, the CIA gathered enough intelligence to initiate Operation Absolute Resolve. Surveillance indicated he had no scheduled movement before morning. For planners, this mattered. Any operation of this scale depended on timing. The goal was to act quickly, complete the mission, and withdraw before a wider military response could form. Intelligence officials assessed that the window was limited, but workable. Shortly before midnight in Washington, the president approved the final execution order. That decision triggered a chain of events that had been prepared quietly over weeks. The order was transmitted through encrypted military networks to US Southern Command, which is responsible for US military operations in Latin America and the Caribbean, and to US forces already positioned at sea and in the air. At approximately 12:10 a.m. local time in Venezuela, the operation began. The first phase did not involve explosions or visible movement. Instead, it targeted information and communication. US cyber and electronic warfare units disrupted Venezuelan military networks. Radar systems around Caracas began to malfunction. Communications between air defense units, command centers, and regional commanders became unreliable. These actions were designed to slow decision-making and prevent a coordinated response. For civilians in Caracas, nothing obvious had happened yet, but inside Venezuelan military command rooms, confusion was growing. About 10 minutes later, the operation entered its first physical phase. US Navy destroyers positioned in international waters launched Tomahawk cruise missiles toward Venezuela. These missiles are designed to strike precise targets from long distances. They flew low over the sea and approached land from multiple directions, making them harder to detect. The targets were specific military sites. These included radar installations, air defense coordination facilities, and command centers located around the capital. The intent was not to damage the city itself, but to remove the military systems that could interfere with the rest of the operation. The missiles struck within a narrow time window. Explosions were reported at several military locations almost simultaneously. Power outages followed in parts of Caracas, affecting both military facilities and nearby neighborhoods. Venezuelan air defense units attempted to respond, but the earlier cyber disruptions made coordination difficult. Shortly after the missile strikes, US Air Force aircraft entered Venezuelan airspace. Their role was limited and carefully defined. They were not there to conduct broad attacks. Instead, they targeted any remaining air defense systems that posed an immediate threat. Precision-guided weapons were used, chosen for their accuracy and reduced risk of unintended damage. These air operations lasted only as long as necessary. Once commanders were confident that the airspace over key areas of Caracas was secure, attention shifted to the central objective of the mission. At approximately 12:50 a.m., US Special Operations Forces were inserted into Caracas by helicopter. These forces are trained for missions involving specific individuals or locations, rather than large-scale combat. The helicopters flew at low altitude to reduce the chance of detection and landed near the compound where Maduro was believed to be staying. The compound sits in a secure residential zone of the base, naturally shielded by steep hills on three sides. High privacy walls surround it, topped with security measures. Multiple checkpoints guard the approaches. It's more like a militarized luxury home than a simple residence, complete with a large swimming pool and patio for the regime elite. This fortress-like structure is multi-level, likely 2 to 3 stories. Steel doors block key access points, built specifically to withstand breaches. Inside, a prominent steel-reinforced safe room or panic vault waits, solid metal walls and doors, almost like a bank vault, where Maduro reportedly tried to flee as the raid began. It's very highly guarded. Loyal security personnel, including possible Cuban bodyguards, protect the site. Reports describe dozens in the personal detail, but exact numbers inside that night remain unclear. In a recent interview, Donald Trump claimed that the US military used what he described as a secret sonic weapon during the operation that resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. Trump boasted that the technology was unique to the United States, suggesting that no other country possessed anything like it. Speculation about the alleged weapon had circulated earlier after White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the device used in the operation left Venezuelan soldiers bleeding from the nose and vomiting. While Trump acknowledged the weapon's existence, he declined to provide technical details, remaining vague about how it worked.
Been used a sonic weapon that took out many of the Cuban bodyguards that were used to defend Maduro. Lots of people saw the details about that weapon and were concerned. Is that something that Americans should be afraid of, something the United States is combating?
Yeah, something I don't want to, nobody else has it. We have weapons that nobody knows about. And I say it's probably good not to talk about them, but we have some amazing weapons. That was an amazing attack.
Sonic weapons are generally understood to use intense sound waves to disorient or incapacitate targets. Some systems rely on focused, painful sound beams, while others operate at frequencies designed to affect hearing and balance. Such weapons have been associated with symptoms including headaches, disorientation, nausea, and long-term hearing damage. According to an account attributed to someone claiming to be one of Maduro's guards, the effects were immediate and debilitating, leaving soldiers unable to stand after the device was deployed.
At one point, they launched something. I don't know how to describe it. It was like a very intense sound wave. Suddenly, I felt like my head was exploding from the inside. We all started bleeding from the nose. Some were vomiting blood. We fell to the ground, unable to move. We couldn't even stand up after that sonic weapon, or whatever it was. I never seen anything like it.
Ground teams moved quickly after landing. Some units established temporary control of nearby streets. Their purpose was not to occupy territory, but to prevent interference during the operation. Other teams moved directly towards the compound. Venezuelan presidential guard units were present and did respond. A brief exchange followed. It was confined to the immediate area and did not spread beyond the compound and surrounding streets. US forces relied on speed, coordination, and surprise to neutralize resistance. There was no attempt to pursue retreating guards or engage additional units. Once access was gained, US teams entered the compound. They moved methodically, following plans developed through prior intelligence and rehearsals. Communication with aircraft overhead and commanders outside the country remained constant throughout the operation. At approximately 1:05 a.m., Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were located. Both were taken into custody. There was no extended standoff. The objective was to secure them quickly and move to extraction. Identification was confirmed, restraints were applied, and preparations for departure began immediately. The extraction phase followed the same principles as the insertion: speed and control. Helicopters returned to the landing zone while US aircraft maintained surveillance of the wider area. Venezuelan military units elsewhere in the city were still attempting to understand what had occurred and did not mount a coordinated response during this period. By around 1:25 a.m., the helicopters carrying Maduro and Flores departed Caracas. Their route was planned to minimize exposure time and avoid known military installations. US naval and air forces remained on alert in case of interception, but none occurred. The helicopters reached US naval vessels positioned offshore in the Caribbean. From there, Maduro and Flores were transferred to fixed-wing aircraft for transport to the United States. US officials stated that they would face existing criminal charges related to drug trafficking and corruption. With the primary objective completed, US commanders shifted focus to withdrawal. By approximately 2:30 a.m., all US personnel involved in the ground operation had exited Venezuelan territory. Air and naval assets remained in place briefly to monitor Venezuelan military activity and ensure a safe disengagement. Once commanders assessed that there was no immediate threat, those forces stood down. No additional strikes were conducted. As dawn approached, Caracas began to wake to the aftermath. Residents reported hearing explosions earlier in the night and experiencing power outages. Social media filled with images of damaged military facilities and heavy security presence. A reported 57 people died in total, including 32 Cuban fighters, 23 Venezuelan soldiers, and 2 civilians. Senior Venezuelan officials issued statements condemning the operation and asserting national sovereignty. Emergency meetings were called within the Venezuelan government to determine next steps. Military units were placed on heightened alert, though no immediate counteraction occurred. Later that day, US officials publicly confirmed that the operation had taken place and that Nicolás Maduro was in US custody.
It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolás Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence.
The announcement emphasized that the mission was limited, targeted, and complete. US leaders stated that there was no intention to occupy Venezuelan territory or engage in prolonged military conflict. International reaction was swift and divided. Some governments condemned the operation as a violation of international law and national sovereignty. Others characterized it as an unprecedented enforcement action against alleged criminal leadership. Calls were made for emergency diplomatic discussions and international review. Inside Venezuela, the political situation became uncertain. With Maduro removed, questions emerged about leadership, legitimacy, and control of state institutions. Supporters and opponents of the government reacted in different ways, and the country entered a period of instability. For the United States, the operation represented one of the most complex and controversial military actions in the Western Hemisphere in decades. It combined cyber operations, naval strikes, air operations, and special forces action into a single, tightly timed mission, lasting only a few hours. The planning emphasized speed, precision, and restraint. Every phase was designed to support the next, with the objective of completing the mission before a wider conflict could develop. By the end of January 3rd, the immediate military operation was over. Its political, legal, and international consequences, however, were only beginning. This reconstruction outlines how the operation unfolded, step by step, based on established military methods and publicly discussed scenarios. It is a detailed account of how such an operation could be executed, from the final decision to the final withdrawal, in a matter of hours. Thanks for watching. To support the channel, head over to patreon.com/Fent to get access to source files and extras.